Do you hear that sound, Sugar? That buzzing? Down here in Georgia, we say the cicadas sing to drown out the screams of the past. They make all that noise just so we don't have to listen to our own consciences. But today, Lord, have mercy. Today, not even if the sky split open with thunder could I stop hearing my son's voice. He just left. The red dust from his truck tires hasn't even settled on the driveway yet. And he didn't take any of my peach cobbler, like he's done every Sunday for 40 years. He took my peace, and he left me with a threat that could burn this whole family to the ground. Pull up that wicker chair, honey. Sit a spell. The heat is heavy today, isn't it? The air is so thick you could chew it. That's what sin feels like when you've been carrying it around in your handbag for 45 years. It sits right here, on your chest, stealing your breath. You look at me, and I know what you see. You see Miss Harper, the respectable widow of Hank, the most honest mechanic this county ever knew. You see the mother of Caleb Miller, the big-shot real estate developer. You see the lady who organizes the fall festival at the First Baptist Church and brings the best potato salad to the potluck. Miss Harper is a saint, they say at the beauty parlor. Miss Harper took care of her dying aunt and uncle like an angel. If they knew, oh sweet Jesus, if they knew the dirt I swept under these floorboards, the whole congregation would cross the street just to avoid my shadow. Because my story isn't about goodness, Sugar. It isn't about charity. It's about weakness. It's about greed. And it's about the best-kept lie in the state of Georgia. I'm going to tell you the truth now, not because I want to, but because I have to. My son Caleb, he just found the tip of the iceberg, and if I don't tell my version of the story, he's going to tell his to a judge. And his version, well, his version comes with a $20 million price tag. The secret I'm holding involves the people I was supposed to respect the most. It involves blood. It involves family. It involves the kind of betrayal that Leviticus warns you about and that this town doesn't forgive. Take a sip of your tea, honey, and brace yourself, because what I'm about to say, I've never said out loud to a living soul, not even to the preacher in the confessional booth. I was my uncle's mistress. Don't you give me that look. Close your mouth, Sugar, you'll catch flies. I was the other woman to the man who raised me. I was the mistress of Silas Miller, the richest man in this county, the man who owned the Ford dealership, the cotton land, the very ground this town was built on. And I was sleeping with him while his wife, my Aunt Martha, the woman who took me in when I was a starving orphan, was sleeping in the room next door. It wasn't a one-night mistake. It wasn't a moment of weakness after too much bourbon at a Christmas party. It was 12 years. 12 years, honey. A lifetime of lies. Can you imagine what that does to a person's soul? To wake up every morning, pour coffee for your aunt, kiss her cheek, drive her to Bible study, all while knowing that 3 hours earlier you were in her husband's arms, smelling his cologne, listening to him promise you the world? I was 19 when it started, just a baby. I look back at pictures of that girl, ribbons in her hair, eyes wide open, and I want to shake her. But I won't lie to you and say he forced me. Uncle Silas, he didn't have to force anyone. He was Silas Miller. He walked into a room and the air changed. He was powerful, he was charming, and he was the sun that this whole family orbited around. If Silas sneezed, we all caught a cold. If Silas smiled, the crops grew. My Aunt Martha, God rest her cold soul, she was the perfect Southern belle. Hair teased to heaven, pearls always on, house spotless. But she was barren. Her womb was a dry well. She couldn't give Silas the one thing his ego demanded, an heir, a legacy. So, she took me in. I was the poor niece, the charity case. She gave me a room, she gave me clothes, she gave me a job at the dealership filing papers. She thought she was bringing in a daughter. She didn't know she was bringing in her replacement. It started in 1978, in the back office of the Miller Ford dealership, surrounded by Salesman of the Year plaques and the smell of leather seats and cigar smoke. He started telling me I was special, that I had the fire Martha lost years ago, that I was too much woman to be single. And I listened. Because when the most powerful man in town tells a poor girl she's a queen, she believes him. But the affair, the sex, that's the boring part of the story, honey. Adultery happens every day in this town. People cheat. Flesh is weak. What makes my stomach turn over to this day, what keeps me awake staring at the ceiling fan at 3 a.m., is why he kept me, and what he asked me to do. Silas didn't just want a mistress. He wanted a vessel. He was obsessed with his name. The Miller legacy. He used to cry, actually cry, because all his money, all his land, would go to the state or to some distant cousins in Alabama when he died. About 3 years into our arrangement, he sat me down. He looked me in the eye with those icy blue eyes of his, and he made the proposal. He said, "Harper, you have my bloodline. You are family, but you are young and you are fertile." He grabbed my hands. He said, "Give me a son, Harper. Martha can't do it. You can. Give me a boy to carry my name, and I will make sure you never want for anything again." Do you understand the sickness of that? He wanted me to breed for him, like a prized mare. He had it all planned out. "Find a husband," he said. "Find a good, simple boy. Someone who won't ask questions. Someone grateful just to have a pretty girl like you. Marry him, and then keep seeing me. Give me a child, but let the world think it's his." And I did it. God help me, I did it. I found Hank. Sweet, simple Hank. He was a mechanic at the dealership. Grease under his fingernails and a heart of gold. He worshipped the ground I walked on. I married Hank in a ceremony paid for by Uncle Silas. I wore a white dress paid for by Uncle Silas. And I walked down the aisle with Uncle Silas giving me away, gripping my arm just a little too tight, whispering, "Good girl." And then I got pregnant. When Caleb was born, oh, the town rejoiced. "Look at that beautiful baby boy," they said. "Look at those eyes, those Miller eyes." Silas was over the moon. He set up a trust fund before the baby could even crawl. He gave Hank a raise. He bought us this house. He played the part of the generous great uncle perfectly. But here is where the story gets tricky, sugar. Here is where the lie I told the world became the lie I told myself. I slept with Silas, yes. I let him believe he was the father, yes. But I was sleeping with Hank, too. I was a newlywed. Hank was my husband. And for 40 years, I have sworn on the Holy Bible that Caleb is Hank's son. I have to believe that. Because if Caleb is Silas's son, if he is the product of incest and betrayal, then my life is not just a tragedy. It's an abomination. Hank died never knowing. He raised that boy. He taught him to throw a football. He loved him. He died in a work accident thinking he left behind his own flesh and blood. And Silas died thinking he won, thinking he tricked nature. But secrets don't stay buried in the clay forever. Caleb is 42 now. He's smart. He's ruthless, just like Silas was. And he's always wondered why he didn't look like his daddy Hank, why he was so tall, so ambitious, so different. Yesterday, I sat him down in this very parlor. I decided to come clean. Not about the paternity, never about that, but about the affair. I thought if I confessed the sin of adultery, it would be enough. I thought I could control the damage. I told him, "Son, I slept with Uncle Silas. I was young. I was manipulated. I'm sorry." I expected him to cry. I expected him to yell about me betraying his father, but he didn't just get mad, honey. He got quiet. And then he asked the question I've been running from since 1981. "If you were sleeping with him for 12 years, Mom, who am I?" I looked him dead in the eye and I lied. Or maybe I told the truth. I don't know anymore. I said, "You are Hank's son. I know it in my bones. You are a Miller because I am a Miller, but your father was Hank." He walked out of here looking like he believed me, or looking like he wanted to believe me. I thought I had saved us. But he came back this morning, and he wasn't alone. He had a lawyer, and he had a piece of paper in his hand. He looked at me with those cold blue eyes, Silas's eyes, and he said, "Mom, Uncle Silas left $20 million in a frozen trust, and I think I found the key to unlock it." I'm terrified, Sugar. I'm terrified that he's going to prove me a liar. I'm terrified that he's right. And I'm terrified of what's in the safety deposit box that Aunt Martha left behind. Because if that boy proves he's Silas's son, he doesn't just destroy my reputation, he takes everything. But let's go back to the beginning. Before the lawyers, before the DNA, before the millions. Let's go back to the day the devil walked into the office wearing a beige linen suit and offered me a Coca-Cola. To understand the sin, honey, you have to understand the hunger. And I don't mean hunger for food. I mean the hunger of an orphan girl who just wanted to be seen. Let's go back to 1978. Jimmy Carter was in the White House, a Georgia boy, just like us. Disco was dying in New York, but down here, it was still Lynyrd Skynyrd and church hymns. I was 19 years old. I had just graduated high school, and I had nowhere to go. My parents had died in a car wreck on Route 41 when I was a baby. Aunt Martha and Uncle Silas took me in, but let's be clear, I wasn't their daughter. I was their project. I lived in the guest room of their big white-pillared mansion on the hill. I walked on eggshells. I folded my towels in thirds because Martha liked them that way. I chewed with my mouth closed. I said, "Yes, ma'am," and "No, sir." I was invisible. Until Silas decided I wasn't. Uncle Silas owned Miller Ford. Back then, it was the biggest dealership in 3 counties. Acres of shiny metal baking under the sun, Mustangs, F-150s, Thunderbirds. He gave me a job as a receptionist. I sat at the front desk, answering phones, smelling the mix of floor wax, popcorn from the machine, and new car leather. Silas was electric. That's the only word for it. He was 42 then, in his prime. He wore linen suits that never seemed to wrinkle, even in August. He smelled like Old Spice and expensive tobacco. When he walked across the showroom floor, the salesmen straightened their ties. The customers stopped talking. He was the king of this town. And Martha? Aunt Martha was the ice queen. She was beautiful, yes. But she was cold as a church pew on a Tuesday morning. She was obsessed with appearances, with being proper. She didn't touch him. She didn't laugh at his jokes. She treated him like a business partner, not a husband. And Silas, he started to let me see his pain. That's how they get you, Sugar. They don't come at you with claws. They come at you with wounds. They make you feel like you're the only one who can heal them. It started small. I'd be filing papers in the back, and he'd come in to pour himself a bourbon. "You look pretty today, Harper," he'd say. "That yellow dress suits you. Martha never wears color anymore. She's always in beige. It's like living with a ghost." He'd sigh, swirling the ice in his glass. "You have life in you, Harper. You have fire. Don't let this town snuff it out." I would blush. I'd stammer, "Thank you, Uncle Silas." But inside, I was glowing. The king was looking at me. He was confiding in me. He was telling me I had something the perfect Aunt Martha didn't. It made me feel powerful. It made me feel dangerous. The grooming was slow. It was a hand on my shoulder that lingered just a second too long. It was a gift left on my desk, a gold bracelet, with a note that said, "For the girl who runs this place." He started asking me to stay late. Inventory nights, he called them. We'd order pizza. We'd listen to the radio. The dealership would be dark, just the streetlights reflecting off the chrome bumpers outside. He would talk about his legacy, about how empty his life felt without children. "What's the point of all this money?" he'd ask, sweeping his hand around the office. "Who am I building this for? Martha doesn't care. She just cares about the country club." He was painting a picture, stroke by stroke. He was the lonely king. Martha was the cold villain. And I was the breath of fresh air. The night it happened. Lord, I remember the weather. It was storming. A real Georgia gully washer, rain hammering against the glass windows of his office. The power flickered and went out. We were alone in the dark, lit only by the headlights of the cars in the lot and the lightning. I was scared of the thunder. I jumped when a boom shook the building. Silas was standing right next to me. "It's okay," he whispered. His voice was low, rough. "I've got you." He put his hands on my arms. His hands were hot, big. He didn't pull away. "You know," he said, looking down at me, "you remind me of Martha, before she froze over. You remind me of what it feels like to be alive." He touched my face. His thumb traced my lip. "I shouldn't be looking at you like this, Harper. You're my niece, your family." He stepped back, pretending to fight it, acting like the noble man resisting temptation. "Go home, Harper, before I do something that damns us both." Do you see what he did there? He put the choice in my hands. He made me the one who had to cross the line. If I left, I was a child obeying her uncle. If I stayed, I was a woman choosing a man. I was 19. I was stupid. I was hungry for love. I didn't leave. I stepped forward. "I don't want to go home to that empty room," I whispered. He made a sound, like a growl, and he grabbed me. He kissed me. And honey, it wasn't a gentle kiss. It was a claiming. It tasted like bourbon and desperation. He swept the papers off his mahogany desk. Sales reports, invoices, brochures, they went flying everywhere. And right there, with the rain pounding on the roof and the portrait of the founder of Miller Ford watching us from the wall, I became the mistress. I remember staring up at the ceiling tiles while it happened. I remember thinking, Aunt Martha is at home knitting. She's probably wondering where we are. The guilt hit me the second it was over. I felt sick. I felt dirty. I buttoned my blouse with shaking fingers. I couldn't look him in the eye. "I have to go," I said. "I can't believe we did this. We're going to hell." But Silas was calm. He poured another drink. He looked relieved. He walked over to me, buttoned the top button of my shirt that I had missed, and smoothed my hair. "We aren't going to hell, Harper," he said softly. "We just found a little bit of heaven in a miserable world. This is our secret, just ours. It makes us special." He handed me an umbrella. "Drive safe, honey. See you at breakfast." See you at breakfast. That was the horror of it. I drove home in the rain, crying the whole way. I snuck into the house, terrified Martha would be waiting in the dark with a shotgun. But the house was silent. I scrubbed my skin in the shower until it was raw. I tried to wash him off. But the next morning, there he was, sitting at the head of the dining table, reading the newspaper, eating grits and eggs. "Morning, Harper," he said, not even looking up. "Sleep well?" Martha poured me coffee. "You look tired, dear," she said. I looked at him. I looked at her, and I realized I was trapped. I wanted to stop. I swore to myself I would quit the job, move to Atlanta, run away. But that afternoon, he found me in the filing room. He pressed a wad of cash into my hand. "Buy yourself something nice," he whispered. "You made me a happy man." And then he kissed my neck, just a quick peck, and my knees went weak. It became a drug. The secrecy. The money. The way he looked at me like I was the only woman in the world. 3 years, honey. 3 years of sneaking around, in the supply closet, in his truck parked by the river, in hotels in the next county. I wasted my early 20s being the shadow wife of Silas Miller. I watched my friends get married, have babies, build lives. I had nothing but expensive jewelry hidden in a shoebox and a rot in my soul. But Silas wasn't satisfied with just my body anymore. He was getting older. He was 45. His friends were becoming grandfathers. The legacy talk started getting louder. He started looking at me differently. Not with lust, but with calculation. He started checking the calendar on my desk, asking about my cycles. I didn't understand what he was doing. I thought he was just being controlling. I didn't know he was breeding me in his mind. And then came the day that changed everything. The day he stopped being just a cheater and became an architect of people's lives. It was a Tuesday, November 1981. He locked the office door. He didn't pour a drink. He sat me down in the leather chair opposite him. He looked serious, deadly serious. "Harper," he said, "we need to talk about the future." I thought he was going to dump me. I thought, finally, I'm free. But oh no, he didn't want to let me go. He wanted to bind me to him forever, in a way that neither God nor the law could ever undo. He leaned across the desk, and the way the light hit his face, he looked like the devil making a deal at the crossroads. "I have a proposition for you," he said. And that proposition, sugar, that was the beginning of the real nightmare. "You know, honey, there's a saying we have in the South. The devil doesn't come to you with a pitchfork and horns. He comes to you with a smile and a checkbook." That Tuesday in November, Silas Miller was the devil in a three-piece suit. I was sitting in that leather chair across from him. My hands were folded in my lap, sweating. I thought he was going to break up with me. I thought he was going to say, "Harper, Martha knows. You have to leave town." Part of me wanted him to say it. I wanted to be exiled. I wanted to be forced to start over somewhere where nobody knew my name. But Silas didn't want me to leave. He poured 2 fingers of bourbon into a crystal glass. He didn't offer me any. He took a sip, savored the burn, and then he looked at me with those eyes, those Miller eyes, blue as a winter sky and just as cold. "Harper," he said, his voice low and steady, "do you know what keeps me up at night?" I shook my head. "No, sir." He stood up and walked to the window, looking out over the lot, rows and rows of brand-new Fords shining under the streetlights. "Dust," he said. "I own all this steel, all this land, all this money, but in the end it's just dust, because I have nobody to leave it to." He turned back to me. The pain in his face looked real. It probably was real. That's the scary part. My daddy built this business. I expanded it. I made the name Miller mean something in this state. And when I die, it goes to the state, or to some second cousin in Alabama who doesn't know a carburetor from a coffee pot. The Miller line ends with me. It's a dead end. He slammed his hand on the desk. It made me jump. "I cannot accept that, Harper. I am not a man who accepts dead ends." I swallowed hard. "Uncle Silas, why are you telling me this?" He walked around the desk. He leaned against it, looming over me. "Because you are the solution, honey. You are the detour." He crossed his arms. "Martha is a dry well. God bless her, but she's barren. We tried for 20 years. Nothing. But you—" He looked at my stomach, not with lust, with appraisal, like he was looking at a piece of fertile farmland. "You are young. You are healthy. And you have my blood. You are my brother's daughter. Your DNA is close enough. If I have a son with you, he will be a Miller. He will have the jawline. He will have the mind. He will be my heir." I felt the room spin. I tried to stand up. "Silas, that's incest. That's crazy. Even if I gave you a baby, everyone would know." "I'm single. Martha would kill us." He laughed, a short, dry bark of a laugh. "Sit down, Harper." I sat. "I'm not asking you to be a single mother," he said calmly. "I'm not asking you to ruin your reputation. I have a plan. I've been thinking about this for months." He leaned in close, so close I could smell the tobacco on his breath. "You need a husband." I stared at him. "A husband?" "Yes. A storefront. A cover. A man to give the baby a name. A man to walk you to church on Sundays. A man to change the diapers while I raise the boy to be a king." He picked up a file from his desk. He threw it in my lap. I opened it. It was an employee file. The name at the top said, Henry Hank Wilson. Hank? I whispered. The mechanic? From the service bay? Silas nodded. He's perfect, Harper. Think about it. He's 24. He's strong as an ox. He shows up on time, and most importantly, he's simple. He's not a thinker, Harper. He's a doer. He's grateful for his job. And I've seen the way he looks at you when you walk through the garage. I felt sick, physically sick. Hank was a sweet boy. He had grease under his fingernails and a shy smile. He brought me a Coke from the vending machine sometimes. He was innocent. You want me to use him? I asked, my voice trembling. I want you to marry him, Silas corrected. I will give him a promotion next week, make him service manager. He'll feel like he's moving up in the world. He'll have the confidence to ask you out. And when he does, you say yes. Silas, this is wrong. This is evil. This is necessary, he hissed. This is survival. Do you want to be a secretary for the rest of your life? Do you want to count pennies? Or do you want to be the mother of the future owner of Miller Ford? He walked around the chair and put his hands on my shoulders. He started massaging my neck, working out the tension. Listen to me, honey. I will take care of everything. I will pay for the wedding. I will buy you a house, the one on Elm Street with the wraparound porch. I will set up a trust fund for the child before he's even born. You will never worry about a bill again. And Hank? Hank will be the happiest man in Georgia. He gets the prettiest girl in town and a great job. Everybody wins. But the baby, I stammered. How will we know? We'll know, he whispered in my ear. We'll make sure. Once you marry him, you keep seeing me. We double down. And when that baby comes out screaming, if he looks like me, we win. If he looks like Hank, well, we try again. I tried to find a way out. I tried to find a moral backbone in my body. And Martha? I asked. What about your wife? Silas paused. His hands stopped moving. Martha wants the Miller name to survive more than I do. She's tired of people looking at her with pity because she has no children. If you give us a nephew that looks like the family, she will spoil him rotten. She will love him because he is ours. He turned my chair around so I had to face him. Harper, I am offering you a dynasty. I am offering you security. All you have to do is say yes to Hank Wilson. Can you do that? I looked at this man, this powerful, broken, selfish man. And then I thought about my empty bank account. I thought about the loneliness of my little apartment. I thought about how much I wanted to be somebody. Silas was offering me a deal with the devil, yes, but he was also offering me a kingdom. I thought about Hank, sweet, unsuspecting Hank, and I hardened my heart, just like that. Snap, like a dry twig. I looked up at Silas. He needs a raise, I said. If I'm going to marry him, he needs to be making enough to support a family. Silas smiled. It was the smile of a wolf who just caught the scent of blood. Done, he said. He gets a 20% raise on Monday. He poured a second glass of bourbon and handed it to me. To the future, he said. I clinked my glass against his. To the legacy, I whispered. I drank that bourbon in one gulp. It burned going down like liquid fire. And that was it. The contract was signed, not with ink, but with whiskey and silence. I walked out of that office and went straight to the vending machine. Hank was there, wiping his hands on a rag. He looked up at me, surprised. Hey, Miss Harper, he said, blushing. Working late? I smiled at him. The fake smile I would wear for the next 40 years. Hey, Hank, I said. My car is making a funny noise. Do you think maybe you could take a look at it? And maybe we could grab a burger after? You should have seen his face, honey. He looked like he'd won the lottery. He dropped his rag. Yes, ma'am. Yes, Harper. I'd love to. Poor fool. He didn't know he was just a pawn on Silas Miller's chessboard. He didn't know his life was over before it even started. And that night, I went home and prayed. Not for forgiveness. I knew I was past that. I prayed that if I got pregnant, that the baby would have Hank's brown eyes. I prayed that I could cheat the cheater. But Silas Miller always got what he paid for, and he had paid a high price for me. Have you ever worn a white dress when you felt black inside? April 12th, 1982. That was the day I married Hank Wilson. The azaleas were in full bloom, pink and red, exploding all over the church lawn. The air smelled like honeysuckle and expensive perfume. Silas paid for everything. He bought the flowers, he paid the preacher. He hired the band, and since my daddy was dead, Uncle Silas was the one who walked me down the aisle. I remember the doors of the First Baptist Church opening. The organ started playing the wedding march. Every head in town turned to look at me. I felt Silas's hand on my arm. He wasn't just holding me, he was steering me. He leaned down, right before we started walking, and whispered in my ear, "Smile, Harper. You're securing the future." He walked me down that aisle and handed me to Hank, like he was transferring a title deed on a used car. Hank. Oh, bless his sweet heart. He was standing at the altar in a tuxedo that didn't quite fit his broad shoulders, sweat beading on his forehead. He looked at me like I was the Virgin Mary herself. He was crying. He took my hand, and his hand was trembling. I promised to love, honor, and cherish him. I promised to forsake all others. And I looked right past his shoulder at Silas, who was sitting in the front pew next to Aunt Martha, smirking. The reception was at the country club. Silas gave a toast. He raised a glass of champagne and said, "To Hank and Harper, may their home be filled with joy. And with children, lots of children." The whole room cheered. I drank 3 glasses of champagne just to stop my hands from shaking. That night, in the hotel room, Hank was so gentle. He treated me like glass. He kept asking, "Is this okay? Are you happy, Harper?" I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, and I told myself, "This is your life now. Be a good wife. Make this real." For a few weeks, I tried. I really tried. I cooked dinner. I ironed his work shirts. I played house. But Silas didn't wait long. 3 weeks after the honeymoon, he called me at the house. "Lunch break," he said. "The usual spot." I tried to argue. "Silas, I'm married now. It's too risky." "The risk is the point," he said. "And we have a schedule to keep. I checked the calendar on your desk before you quit. You're ovulating next week." So, the double life began. And honey, let me tell you, hell isn't fire and brimstone. Hell is logistics. Hell is checking your watch every 5 minutes. Hell is showering 3 times a day because you're terrified your husband will smell your uncle's cologne on your skin. It was a numbers game. Silas was obsessed with the math of it. "We need to overwhelm the odds," he said. He demanded I see him on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and then I would go home to Hank. And here is the part that twists my gut, sugar. I initiated it with Hank, every single night. Not because I was wild with passion, but because I was desperate. I thought, if I sleep with Hank enough times, maybe God will have mercy. Maybe God will let Hank's seed win. Maybe I can drown out Silas's blood. I was trying to outrun biology with volume. I would hold on to Hank in the dark, burying my face in his chest, praying, "Please let it be you. Please let it be you." It happened fast. July, the heat of the summer. I started feeling sick over the smell of bacon grease. I bought a test at the drugstore 2 towns over so nobody would gossip. I took it in the bathroom of the dealership, trembling. 2 pink lines. Positive. I didn't tell Hank first. I couldn't. Silas was waiting outside the bathroom door. I opened the door and showed him the stick. I have never seen a man look so triumphant. He didn't smile. He glowed. It was terrifying. He grabbed my face and kissed me hard on the mouth right there in the hallway. "We did it," he whispered. "That's a Miller in there. I feel it." He pulled a roll of cash out of his pocket, must have been $500, and shoved it into my purse. Go to the butcher, buy steaks, celebrate with Hank. Make him feel like a man. That night, I told Hank. He dropped to his knees, literally fell to the kitchen floor and wrapped his arms around my legs, sobbing into my apron. I'm gonna be a daddy, he kept saying. I'm gonna be a daddy. He looked up at me, his eyes shining with pure, unadulterated joy. Thank you, Harper. Thank you for making me a father. I stroked his hair, and I felt like the worst monster God ever created. I was letting him celebrate a theft. I was letting him claim a prize that another man had already signed his name on. The pregnancy was a nightmare of luxury. Silas went overboard. He couldn't help himself. He was protecting his investment. He hired a maid to clean my house because Harper shouldn't be lifting heavy things. He paid for the best obstetrician in Atlanta. He bought a crib that cost more than Hank's truck. Hank tried to protest. Mr. Miller, you're too generous. I can provide for my family. Silas would just clap him on the back. Nonsense, son. You're family now. Harper is my favorite niece. I want that baby to have the best. Hank swallowed his pride. He thought Silas was a saint, but the one person watching all this who didn't say a word was Aunt Martha. She watched my belly grow like a hawk watching a field mouse. Every Sunday lunch, she would stare at me. One afternoon, we were sitting on her porch. She was knitting a yellow blanket. You're carrying high, she said, her needles clicking. Click, click, click. Yes, ma'am, I said. Silas is very excited, she said. She didn't look up. He loves family, I stammered. She stopped knitting. She looked at me over her glasses. Her eyes were empty. He loves what belongs to him, she said, and then she went back to knitting. Click, click. I shivered in the 90-degree heat. She knew. Deep down, she knew. But she wanted that baby just as bad as he did. January 1983. A winter storm hit Georgia. Ice on the power lines. The world was gray and frozen. My water broke at 2 a.m. Hank drove me to the hospital in his beat-up Chevy, sliding on the ice, white-knuckled. He was terrified. Silas met us there. Of course he did. He just happened to be awake. He paced the waiting room while I screamed. And Lord, I screamed. It felt like I was being torn apart. My mama used to say, labor pain is Eve's punishment for sin. Well, I must have had a lot of sin to pay for because that labor lasted 20 hours, and then silence. And then a cry. A strong, angry cry. The doctor held him up. It's a boy! Hank was crying, laughing, trying to kiss me. We have a son, Harper. We have a son. But I couldn't look at Hank. I asked the nurse, let me see him. She cleaned him off and wrapped him in the hospital blanket. She handed him to me. I looked down at the tiny face. My heart stopped beating. I looked for Hank in that face. I looked for Hank's soft chin, his brown eyes, his gentle brow. I didn't see Hank. The baby had a dusting of blonde hair. He had a square, strong jaw, even for an infant, and when he opened his eyes, they were blue, not baby blue, ice blue, Miller blue. The door to the delivery room flew open. Silas barged in, ignoring the nurses trying to stop him. He walked straight to the bed. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at Hank. He looked at the bundle in my arms. Hank stepped back, respectful. Come meet your nephew, Uncle Silas. Silas reached out. Let me hold him. I handed the baby to him. My hands were shaking. Silas held that baby up to the light. He looked at the face. He saw exactly what I saw. A slow, terrifying smile spread across Silas's face. Well now, Silas whispered. Hello there, little man. You look just like family. Hank beamed. We're going to name him Caleb. Caleb Henry Wilson. Silas looked at Hank with a flash of annoyance, then smoothed it over. Caleb, Silas said, testing the name. Strong name. Biblical. He's going to do great things, Hank. I'll make sure of it. He looked at me over the baby's head. His eyes locked onto mine. The message was clear. We won. He's mine. I sank back into the pillows, exhausted, terrified. I had prayed for a miracle. I had prayed for Hank's brown eyes. But God doesn't grant requests from sinners like me. I had given birth to a Miller, and looking at Silas holding that baby like he was raising Simba on Pride Rock. I knew that Hank had just lost his son before he even got to hold him. The cover-up was complete, but the theft had just begun. And the town? Oh, the town loved it. Look at that boy, they said later. Those Miller genes are strong, skipped a generation, but that's Silas's spit and image. Everyone called it a miracle of genetics. Nobody dared to call it what it was. Nobody except me in the middle of the night, staring at that baby's blue eyes and wondering if I was raising a child or a curse. They say blood is thicker than water, but down here, honey, money is thicker than blood. And pride? Pride is the thickest of all. Watching Caleb grow up was like watching a slow-motion car crash that lasted 18 years. I was the only one who saw the glass shattering day after day while everyone else was smiling for the pictures. You have to understand the dynamic in that house. We were a modest family. Hank was a mechanic. He came home smelling of grease and Gojo soap. We ate meatloaf on Tuesdays and went to the lake on Saturdays. We were happy, or we should have been. But we had a shadow over us, a long, expensive shadow cast by the mansion on the hill. Caleb. Oh, Caleb was a golden boy. Literally. By the time he was 5, the resemblance wasn't just a coincidence anymore. It was a billboard. Hank had dark, curly hair and brown eyes that crinkled when he smiled. He was soft. Caleb? Caleb was sharp angles and ice. Blonde hair that darkened to a sandy brown, just like Silas's, a jaw that could cut glass, and a way of looking at you, even as a toddler, like he was assessing your net worth. The town. God, the town was blind. Or maybe they just didn't want to see. It's amazing, the ladies at church would chirp, pinching Caleb's cheek. He's the spitting image of his Uncle Silas. Those Miller genes just leapfrogged right over poor Hank. And Hank, my sweet, naive husband? He'd just laugh. He'd puff out his chest and say, "Yeah, he's a Miller all right, gonna be a big man one day." Hank didn't have an ounce of jealousy in his body. He was just proud that his son belonged to royalty. He didn't know he was raising a cuckoo bird in his own nest. The war for Caleb's soul wasn't fought with guns. It was fought with gifts. And poor Hank, he never stood a chance. I remember Caleb's 10th birthday, 1993. Hank had been saving for months. He took extra shifts at the garage, working until his back seized up. He wanted to buy Caleb his first real fishing set. Not a toy, a professional rod and reel. Hank was so excited. He woke Caleb up at dawn. "Happy birthday, son. Look what Daddy got you." Caleb opened it. He smiled. He said, "Thanks, Dad." He was polite. Hank was beaming. "We're gonna go down to the creek this Saturday, just me and you." But at noon, the black Lincoln Town car pulled into our driveway. Uncle Silas got out. He was wearing his linen suit and a Panama hat. Aunt Martha was with him, holding a store-bought cake that cost more than my weekly grocery budget. Silas didn't knock. He just walked onto the lawn. "Where's the birthday boy?" he boomed. Caleb ran out onto the porch. "Uncle Silas." Silas didn't have a wrapped box. He just pointed to the street. Parked behind the Lincoln was a trailer. And on the trailer was a brand new, cherry-red Honda dirt bike. Caleb's eyes went wide. His jaw dropped. "Is that for me?" "Only the best for my nephew," Silas said, lighting a cigar. "Go on, it's gassed up." Caleb didn't look at the fishing pole again. He didn't look at Hank. He ran to that bike like it was oxygen. Hank stood on the porch, holding the wrapping paper from the fishing rod. I saw his shoulders slump. I saw the light go out of his eyes. He walked over to Silas. "Mr. Miller, that's too much. That's dangerous. He's only 10. Silas didn't even look at Hank. He kept his eyes on Caleb, who was revving the engine. "Nonsense, Hank. A boy needs to learn how to handle power. Better he learns it on 2 wheels than on the street. Besides, Millers are built for speed." Millers. He said it right in front of Hank, excluding him, erasing him. I stepped in. I had to. "Silas," I said, my voice tight. "Hank is right. It's too expensive." Silas turned those cold blue eyes on me. The look communicated everything. "I paid for the house you're standing in. I paid for the clothes on your back. And I paid for that boy. Do not cross me." Out loud, he just chuckled. "Oh, Harper, don't be a wet blanket. Let the boy ride." That was our life, honey. Every milestone, Silas hijacked it. Hank tried to teach Caleb to fix cars. "Honest work," Hank called it. Silas hired a tutor to teach Caleb Latin and economics. "Owner's work," Silas called it. Hank wanted Caleb to go to the state university, maybe play football. Silas started taking Caleb on tours of Ivy League schools when he was 15. "You're going to Wharton, son. You're going to learn how to run an empire." And Caleb? Caleb soaked it up. Children are smart, sugar. They know where the power lies. They know who the alpha dog is. Caleb loved Hank, I think. But he respected Silas. He feared Silas. He wanted to be Silas. He started walking like him. Hands in pockets, chin up. He started treating service workers, waitresses, cashiers, with that same polite arrogance that Silas had. It broke my heart. I looked at my son and I saw the man I slept with, not the man I married. I saw the entitlement growing in him like a weed. There was one day, Lord, this day still haunts me. Caleb was 16. He had gotten into some trouble at school, bullying. He had made some poor kid cry because of his clothes. The principal called us. Hank was furious. He was a good man, a kind man. He didn't raise a bully. "I'm going down there," Hank said, grabbing his keys. "I'm going to make him apologize to that boy. I'm going to ground him for a month." He was being a father, a real father. But by the time Hank got to the high school, Silas was already there. The principal's secretary told me later what happened. Silas had walked into the principal's office, closed the door, and wrote a check for a new scoreboard for the football stadium. When Hank arrived, the principal met him in the hallway. "It's all handled, Mr. Wilson. Just a misunderstanding. Caleb is a good boy, high spirits, that's all." Hank was confused. "But he bullied a kid. He needs to learn." And then Caleb walked out of the office. With Silas. Silas had his hand on Caleb's shoulder. "Come on, Caleb," Silas said. "Let's go get lunch. Your dad has to get back to work." Hank stood there in the hallway in his greasy coveralls, watching his son walk away with his boss. Caleb didn't even look back. He got into Silas's Cadillac. Hank came home that night and he cried in my arms. He said, "Harper, I feel like I'm losing him. I feel like he doesn't belong to me. It's like Silas owns him." I held my husband's head against my chest, and I stroked his hair, and I lied again. "You're crazy, honey. He loves you. Silas is just rich. You can't compete with money, but you're his dad." But inside, I was screaming, because Hank was right. Silas did own him. He owned the biology, and he was buying the biography. And Aunt Martha? She played her part too. She became the doting grandmother. She gave Caleb etiquette lessons. She bought him suits. She would look at him across the Sunday dinner table with a hunger that gave me chills. One Thanksgiving, when Caleb was 17, he made a toast. He stood up at the head of the table, Silas's spot, because Silas was in the bathroom. He held his wine glass just like Silas. He smiled just like Silas. "I want to thank Uncle Silas and Aunt Martha," Caleb said, for giving me the opportunities my parents couldn't. My parents couldn't. Hank looked down at his plate of turkey. He looked small. I looked at Martha. She caught my eye and winked, a tiny, imperceptible wink. It was her way of saying, "We won." The grooming was complete, sugar. By the time Caleb turned 18, he wasn't Hank's son anymore, not in spirit. He was a Miller. He was arrogant, ambitious, and cold. Hank had been reduced to a roommate, a nice man who fixed the car. Silas had successfully cloned himself, but here is where God, or maybe karma, decided to intervene. Because you can buy a boy's soul, but you can't buy time. Just as Caleb was getting ready to leave for college, paid for by the Miller Trust, of course, Silas started to slow down. The heart that was 2 sizes too small started to give out. He got winded walking up the stairs. His face turned gray, and that terrified him. Because Silas realized he was running out of time to make it official. He had the heir, but he hadn't given him the name. And that is when Silas got dangerous. He didn't just want to be the uncle anymore. He started talking about adoption, about changing wills. He started getting reckless. And I knew that if Silas didn't die soon, he was going to blow the whole secret wide open just to satisfy his ego before the curtain fell. I started praying for my uncle's death, honey, every night. Please, God, take him before he destroys Hank. Take him before he tells Caleb. It's a terrible thing to pray for death, but I was protecting my husband, or so I told myself. Maybe I was just protecting myself. But be careful what you pray for, because death came, but it didn't come clean, and it didn't come quiet. It came with a thud on a golf course, and it left a mess that 20 years later is still staining my floor. I told you I prayed for Silas to die. I got down on my knees and begged the Almighty to stop his heart before he could blow up my life. Be careful what you ask for, sugar, because God answers prayers, but the devil delivers the message. It was May of 2004. The azaleas were dying off, turning that ugly brown color on the branch. The call came at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday. Silas was at the Augusta National Golf Club. He was on the 9th hole. He swung his driver, watched the ball sail down the fairway, clutched his chest, and dropped dead before he hit the grass. A massive coronary. The doctor said he was dead before he hit the ground. He died rich, doing what he loved, wearing a silk polo shirt. He didn't suffer. He left the suffering for the rest of us. When the phone rang in my kitchen, I knew. You know that feeling? When the air in the house suddenly goes still? It was Aunt Martha. Her voice was dry as old paper. "Harper, he's gone." That was it. No tears, no screaming, just a fact. I hung up the phone and I stood there gripping the counter. I should have felt relief. The threat was gone. The man who owned me was gone. But honey, grief is a complicated beast. I didn't feel relief. I felt like someone had ripped a lung out of my chest. I had loved him. In a twisted, sick, Stockholm Syndrome kind of way, I loved him. He was my first lover. He was the father of he was the architect of my son. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw myself on the floor and wail, but I couldn't. Hank was in the next room watching a game. I had to wipe my face, smooth my hair, and walk into the living room as the grieving niece. "Hank," I said, my voice shaking just the right amount. "It's Uncle Silas. He passed away." The next 4 days were a masterclass in acting. The funeral was the biggest event Savannah had seen in a decade. The governor sent flowers. The mayor gave a eulogy. The church was packed with people who owed Silas money or feared him. And there I was. I had to stand 2 steps behind Aunt Martha. That's the rule. The widow stands first. The family stands back. I watched Martha receive the flag. I watched her accept the condolences, and I stood there in my navy blue dress, because black was for the widow, and I buried my lover from the 2nd row. I wanted to shout at the coffin. I knew him better. I knew the mole on his back. I knew his fears. You only knew his checkbook. But I swallowed it. I swallowed it, like I swallowed everything else for 20 years. And Caleb? That was the knife in the heart. Caleb was 21 then, a senior in college. He stood next to the coffin like he was the chief mourner. He cried openly. He touched Silas's face in the casket. He looked more like the grieving son than anyone else in that church. People whispered, "Look how much he loved his uncle. Look at the resemblance." Even in death, Silas was claiming him. Hank stood next to Caleb, patting his back awkwardly. "It's okay, son. He's in a better place." Caleb shrugged Hank's hand off. He didn't want comfort from the mechanic. He wanted to mourn the king. After Silas was in the ground, things changed. The will was read. It was a standard trust. Everything went to Martha for her lifetime, and then to family trusts to be determined later. There was no secret letter, no surprise adoption. Silas had died with the secret in his throat. I breathed for the first time in decades. I thought, we made it. The secret is buried in the Miller mausoleum. Life went on. But it was a gray life. Hank, poor, sweet Hank. He thought that with Silas gone, he would finally get his son back. He thought the spell was broken. He tried so hard, honey. He invited Caleb on fishing trips. He tried to talk about football. But Caleb was distant. He was angry. He felt like he had been cheated out of a mentor. He treated Hank like a nuisance. I watched my husband shrink. He aged 10 years and 5. The light went out of his eyes because he realized that even with the giant dead, he was still a dwarf in his son's eyes. And then came 2009, 5 years after Silas. God decided to balance the books. It wasn't a golf course this time. It was the shop. It was a Tuesday again. Why do tragedies always happen on Tuesdays? Hank was working late. He was under a Ford pickup. Ironic, isn't it? A Ford. The hydraulic lift failed. A seal blew out. 3 tons of steel came down. He didn't suffer either, they told me. It was instant. When the police knocked on my door that night, I didn't have to act. I collapsed. I fell onto this very porch and I screamed until my throat bled. I wasn't screaming for a lover. I was screaming for the only good thing I ever had. Hank was the innocent bystander in my car crash. He loved me. He loved Caleb. He worked his fingers to the bone for us, and I repaid him with lies. I repaid him by letting another man steal his son's heart. Hank's funeral was different. There were no governors, no mayors. Just the guys from the shop wearing clean work shirts, the neighbors who remembered how Hank fixed their lawnmowers for free. It was a small service in the chapel. The flowers were cheap carnations, not lilies. And the grief. The grief in that room was real. It was thick. But I looked at Caleb. He was 26 now, wearing a tailored suit that Silas would have been proud of. He wasn't crying. He looked uncomfortable. He checked his watch twice during the sermon. He was sad, sure, but he wasn't devastated. To him, Hank was a nice guy who died. Not a titan who fell. When we were standing at the gravesite, a simple plot, nowhere near the Miller mausoleum, Caleb put his arm around me. "Don't worry, Mom," he said. "I'll take care of you. The Miller Trust pays out good dividends." The Miller Trust. Standing over his father's open grave, he was talking about his uncle's money. I wanted to slap him. I wanted to shake him and scream. Cry for him. Cry for the man who changed your diapers. Cry for the man who taught you to walk, not for the man who bought you things. But I didn't. I just nodded and let him lead me to the limousine. Because I realized then I had buried 2 men. One held my body. One held my heart. But neither of them held the truth. Hank died believing a lie. Silas died keeping a lie. And I was the only one left holding the bag, or so I thought. Because there was one other person left alive. Aunt Martha. After Hank died, it was just us 2 widows. The Miller women, they called us. We started spending a lot of time together. Sunday lunches, tea on the porch, two old women in black, sipping tea, talking about the weather. We never mentioned the affair, not once. We talked about roses. We talked about the church bazaar. But I would catch her looking at me, staring at me over her teacup. Her eyes were sharp, calculating. She watched Caleb like a hawk. Every time Caleb came to visit, Martha would study him. She would look at his hands, his walk. She knew. I told myself she didn't. I told myself she was just a lonely old woman. But deep down, I knew she was the keeper of the keys. And she waited. She waited until she was on her deathbed to turn the lock. She waited until there were no men left to protect. And when she finally spoke, she didn't just open a door, she kicked it down. That was last week. Martha lived to be 89. She outlived them all out of pure spite, I think. When the hospice nurse told me it was time, I went to her room. The big bedroom in the mansion, the bed where she slept alone for 40 years while I slept with her husband. She sent the nurse away. "Harper," she croaked. I sat on the edge of the bed. I felt guilty. I felt sad. "I'm here, Aunt Martha." She grabbed my wrist. Her grip was like a bird's claw, bony and cold. She pulled me close. Her breath smelled like medicine and decay. And she asked me the question that shattered my world, the question that proved that my perfect crime had a witness all along. "They say the dying have a smell. It's not rot, honey. It's sweeter than that. It smells like old flowers and dust. It smells like secrets finally turning into vapor. Last week, when I walked up the grand staircase of the Miller mansion to see Aunt Martha for the last time, that smell was so thick I could taste it. It was 2023. Martha was 89 years old. She had outlived Silas by nearly 20 years. She had outlived Hank. She had sat in that big house, surrounded by oil paintings and silence, watching the world change while she stayed frozen in 1980. I had been taking care of her, bringing her soup, reading her the Psalms. We had a rhythm, Martha and I, a polite dance. We talked about the garden club. We talked about Caleb's real estate deals. We never, ever talked about the ghost sleeping in the bed between us. But that Tuesday, the air was different. The hospice nurse met me in the hallway. She looked tired. "She's refusing morphine, Mrs. Wilson," the nurse said. "She says she needs to keep a clear head. She's asking for you." I walked into the master bedroom. It was like walking into a museum. Heavy velvet curtains drawn tight against the sun. The air conditioning was set to 65 degrees, bone chilling. Martha was lying in that massive 4-poster rice bed. She looked tiny. A little bird made of parchment paper and gray hair. But her eyes. Lord, her eyes were wide open, and they were sharp. She watched me walk across the Persian rug. "Close the door, Harper," she whispered. Her voice sounded like dry leaves scraping together. "And lock it." I did as I was told. I always did what Martha told me. I pulled a chair up to the bedside. "Can I get you some water, Aunt Martha? Or maybe read—" "Stop it," she snapped. The strength in her voice surprised me. She reached out a hand, skeletal, covered in liver spots and diamonds, and grabbed my wrist. Her grip was iron. "We don't have time for the pleasantries, Harper. The chariot is coming for me, and I'm not getting on it with this baggage." My heart started to hammer against my ribs. I tried to pull my hand away, but she held on. "What baggage, Martha?" She looked at me with a look I will never forget. It wasn't anger. It wasn't hate. It was a terrifying, cold clarity. "Do you think I'm stupid?" she asked. I don't know what you mean." "Don't lie to the dying girl. It's bad luck." She coughed, a wet, rattling sound, but kept her eyes on mine. "I know about you and Silas. I've known since 1978. Since the first time you came home with your blouse buttoned wrong and his smell on your hair." The floor dropped out from under me. 45 years. For 45 years, I thought I was the clever one. I thought I was the actress. "Martha, I started to cry. "I'm so sorry. I was young. He was Be quiet, she hissed. I didn't bring you here for an apology. I brought you here for the truth. She let go of my wrist and fell back against the pillows, breathing hard. I didn't just know, Harper. I allowed it. I stared at her. What? I was barren, she said, staring up at the ceiling fan. I was a failure as a wife in the eyes of this town. Silas was going to leave me, or worse. He was going to humiliate me publicly with some trashy waitress. She turned her head to look at me. Better the devil you know. Better the niece I raised. I knew you wouldn't take him away from me. I knew you wanted the money and the comfort just as much as I did. So I made a choice. I turned down the volume on the television when you two were working late. I looked the other way. I felt sick. All these years, I carried the guilt of betraying her. And she had been watching me, calculating, using me as a pacifier for her husband. We were both monsters. We shared him, she whispered, like a business asset. Then, the room got even colder. Martha pushed herself up on one elbow. She was trembling with effort. But there is one thing I never knew for sure. One thing Silas took to his grave. She pointed a shaking finger at the framed photo of Caleb on the vanity table. It was a picture of him winning Businessman of the Year. He looked powerful. He looked like a miller. That boy, she said. What about him? I asked, my voice barely audible. He has Silas's hands. He has Silas's walk. He has Silas's greed. She leaned closer to me. Her eyes were pleading now, desperate. I need to know, Harper. I need to know if I raised my husband's bastard or if God just played a cruel joke on poor Hank. She grabbed my face with her cold hands. Look at me. Swear on your mother's soul. Is Caleb his? This was it, honey, the moment of judgment. The truth was right there, sitting on the tip of my tongue. Yes, he is Silas's son. We made him to replace you. I could have given her the truth. It might have given her peace, or it might have destroyed her last moments. But then I thought about Caleb. I thought about the DNA. I thought about the scandal. If I admitted it to Martha and she told the nurse, or wrote it down, I had to protect the lie. I had to bury the body one last time. I looked into the eyes of the woman who raised me, the woman I had betrayed for half a century, and I summoned the best performance of my life. I didn't blink. I didn't look away. I took her hands in mine. Aunt Martha, I said, my voice steady as a rock. I sinned with Silas. Yes, I laid with him, and I will answer to God for that. I squeezed her hands. But I laid with Hank too, and I swear to you, I swear on my life, Caleb is a Wilson. He is Hank's son. Silas he just wanted to believe he wasn't. We all saw what we wanted to see. But the blood is Hank's. Martha stared at me. She searched my face for a twitch, a flicker of deceit. The silence stretched out for an eternity. The only sound was the oxygen machine hissing in the corner. Hiss, click, hiss, click. Finally, she exhaled, a long, shuddering breath. Her shoulders dropped. Hank's, she whispered. Poor, sweet Hank. She closed her eyes. A tear leaked out and rolled into her hairline. Good, she said softly. That's good. The money stays in the family. But the sin dies with us. She believed me. Or maybe she just wanted to believe me. Just like I wanted to believe it all those years ago. She squeezed my hand one last time. You can go now, Harper. I'm tired. I walked out of that room shaking. I had to lean against the wall in the hallway just to keep from collapsing. I had lied to a dying woman. I had denied my son's true father to the only person who might have understood. But I felt safe. Do you understand? I felt safe. Martha was the last witness. The last person who could connect the dots. With her gone, the secret was sealed. She died that night in her sleep. At the funeral, I stood by her grave, next to Silas, next to Hank, and I felt a strange sense of victory. I was the survivor, the last of the Mohicans. I had navigated the minefield for 40 years, and I had made it to the other side without blowing up. Caleb was there, of course. He looked bored. He checked his emails during the burial. He asked me afterwards, "Did she say anything about the estate? About the box?" "What box?" I asked. "She had a safety deposit box at the bank," Caleb said. "She told me once that she kept her insurance policy in there. I figured she meant jewelry." I shrugged. She didn't mention it. She just talked about the old days. I thought that was the end of it. I thought the box was just senile rambling. I went home. I drank a glass of wine on the porch. I toasted to the silence. I thought, it's over. I can finally be just a widow, just a mother. But silence is tricky, sugar. Sometimes silence isn't peace. Sometimes it's just the calm before the tornado touches down. I didn't know that while I was feeling safe, Caleb was feeling suspicious. I didn't know that my denial, my absolute insistence that he was Hank's son, was actually the thing that pushed him over the edge. Because Caleb knew one thing about me that I forgot. He knew I was a liar, and he knew that if I was lying about the affair, I was probably lying about the rest. So I sat there in my false peace for a week, until last Sunday, when I decided to clear the air and tell him about the affair to absolve my conscience. I thought a partial truth would be enough. I thought I could give him the appetizer and hide the main course. But I forgot that my son has a Miller appetite, and he wasn't leaving the table until he ate the whole truth. Sunday, the Lord's Day, the day we are supposed to rest and repent. I didn't do much resting last Sunday, honey, but I did a whole lot of repenting. Or at least, I staged a performance of it. After Aunt Martha died, the silence in my house got too loud. I started hearing whispers in the walls. I started feeling like the ghost of Silas was pacing in the hallway. I convinced myself that I needed to tell Caleb something. You see, guilt is like water pressure in old pipes. If you don't let a little bit out, the whole house blows up. I decided to give Caleb a leak. Just a little stream of truth. Enough to satisfy the gods of karma, but not enough to drown us. He came over at 1 p.m., like he always does. He parked his BMW next to where Hank's old truck used to sit. The contrast broke my heart, but I smiled anyway. He walked in, loosening his tie. He looked tired. He looked rich. "Hey, Mom," he said, kissing my cheek. He smelled like expensive leather and stress. "I made pot roast," I said. "I can't stay long," he said, checking his phone. "I have a meeting with the zoning board at 3. Always business, always running. Just like Silas. I took a deep breath. I gripped the edge of the dining table until my knuckles turned white. "Sit down, Caleb. You're not going to the zoning board. We need to talk." Something in my voice stopped him. He put his phone away. He sat down. "Is it cancer?" he asked. That's the first place his mind went. "No, it's not a sickness of the body. It's a sickness of the past." I poured him a glass of iced tea. My hand was shaking so bad the ice clinked against the glass like a wind chime. Clink, clink, clink. "Caleb," I started. "You know I loved your father. Hank was a good man." He frowned. "Was? Mom, Dad's been dead for 14 years. What is this about?" "It's about before you were born. It's about me and Uncle Silas." When I said Silas's name, Caleb's posture changed. He straightened up. He always did that when Silas was mentioned, like a soldier hearing a bugle. "What about Uncle Silas?" "I need to clear my conscience," I said, looking down at my hands. "For 12 years. Starting before I married your father and ending long after you were born. I had an affair with Silas." The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush furniture. Caleb didn't blink. He just stared at me. His face went blank. "An affair," he repeated, flat, emotionless. "Yes. With his wife in the house? Sometimes, yes. With my father working in his garage? Yes. He let out a short, sharp breath, a laugh that wasn't a laugh. Wow, okay, that's a lot, Mom. That's disgusting, actually. He stood up and walked to the fireplace. He looked at the photo of Hank on the mantel. So Dad was what? The punchline? The idiot who fixed the boss's cars while the boss was screwing his wife? Don't talk like that, I snapped. It was complicated. Silas was powerful. I was young. He manipulated me. You were a grown woman, Caleb shouted. He spun around, his face red. You made a choice. You betrayed Dad every single day. For 12 years? That's not a mistake, Mom. That's a lifestyle. He was pacing now. The anger was rolling off him in waves. I looked up to you. I thought you were the grieving widow. But you were the grieving mistress. That's why you cried so hard at Silas's funeral, isn't it? You weren't crying for an uncle. You were crying for your boyfriend. I took it. I sat there and took every lash of the whip because I deserved it. But then he stopped pacing. He stopped in front of the hallway mirror. He looked at his reflection. Then he looked at me. And the question I had been dreading for 40 years finally came out of his mouth. Wait a minute. He did the math in his head. I saw his eyes narrowing. You said 12 years. You said it started before I was born. Yes, I whispered. And it continued after. Yes. He walked slowly toward me. He looked like a predator stalking prey. I've heard the rumors, Mom. I'm not deaf. People in town, they used to joke about how I looked like him, about the Miller eyes. He leaned down, placing his hands on the table. If you were sleeping with him when I was conceived, who is my father? This was the moment, the cliff edge. One slip and I fall. One slip and he falls. I looked up at him. I summoned every ounce of love I had for Hank. I summoned every memory of Hank's kindness. Caleb, I said, my voice steady as steel. You listened to me. I made mistakes. I was a sinner. I went to bed with a man who wasn't my husband. But there is one thing I did not do. I stood up so I could look him in the eye. I did not pass that man's blood to you. Caleb looked skeptical. How can you be sure? Did you do a test? DNA wasn't a thing back then. I didn't need a test, I lied. I knew my body. I was meticulous, Caleb. When I was with Silas, I took precautions, every single time. I was terrified of having his child. Terrified. I grabbed his hands. He tried to pull away, but I held on. But with Hank, with your father, we were trying. We wanted a baby. I tracked the days on a calendar. When you were conceived, Silas was out of town. He was in Atlanta for a dealer conference. I remember it because he brought me back a silk scarf. You were made in this house, in your father's bed, with love. Caleb was listening. He wanted to believe me. I could see the desperation in his eyes. He didn't want to be a monster. He didn't want to be the product of incest. But the eyes, Mom, he whispered. Look at me. I look just like him. You look like a Miller, I insisted. I am a Miller, Caleb. Silas was my father's brother. That gene pool is strong. You got the Miller height and the Miller eyes from me. From my side of the family. But your heart? Your hands? I pressed his hand to his chest. That heart is Hank Wilson. Silas was cold. Silas was selfish. Are you selfish, Caleb? No. You are a good man. You take care of your family. You work hard. That is Hank coming through. Biology isn't just a face, it's a soul. And your soul is Wilson. It was a masterclass in manipulation. I used his own ego against him. I used his desire to be good to blind him to the truth. I watched the tension leave his shoulders. He exhaled, a long, shaky breath. He sat back down, burying his face in his hands. God, he muffled. I thought for a second. I thought I was his. Never, I said fiercely. You are Hank's son. Don't you ever doubt that. Hank loved you more than life itself. Do not dishonor his memory by questioning that." He stayed silent for a long time. The clock on the wall ticked, tick-tock, tick-tock. Finally, he looked up. His eyes were red. "I believe you, Mom," he said, "about the dad thing, because if I don't believe that, if I'm his—" He shuddered. "I don't think I could live with that." "You don't have to," I said softly. He stood up. He buttoned his jacket. He was putting his armor back on. But the rest of it? The affair? He looked at me with cold disgust. "I can't forgive that. Not today. You made a fool out of Dad. You let Silas buy us things, knowing what you were doing. That dirt bike? The college tuition? It was all blood money, wasn't it? It was payment for services rendered." "It wasn't like that." "It was exactly like that." He cut me off. "I feel sick, Mom. I look at this house, I look at you, and I just see lies." He walked to the door. "I'm going. Don't call me. I need to think about whether I want a mother who was the town whore for the richest man in Georgia." He opened the door. The heat rushed in. "I'll take care of you financially," he said, his voice void of emotion, "because Dad would have wanted that, but don't expect Sunday lunch for a while." He slammed the door. I watched through the window as he got into his BMW and sped away. I sank onto the sofa. I was shaking. I was crying. But honey, underneath the tears, I was smiling. I had done it. He hated me for the cheating. Fine, I could live with that. But he believed he was Hank's son. I had protected the big lie by sacrificing the small truth. I thought I had won. I poured myself a glass of bourbon, Silas's brand, and I toasted to the picture of Hank on the mantel. "I saved him, Hank," I whispered. "I saved our boy from the truth." I really believed it. I thought the storm had passed. I went to bed that night and slept better than I had in 40 years. But I forgot one thing: sugar. I forgot that Caleb is a businessman. And in business, you don't just take people's word for it. You verify. You do your due diligence. And while I was sleeping the sleep of the just, Caleb wasn't sleeping at all. He was driving, not home to his wife. He was driving to the old Miller Ford building, which had been closed up for years. He was looking for something he remembered from his childhood, something that would blow my story out of the water. And on Wednesday, 3 days after our talk, he came back, and he didn't knock. Monday morning arrived with a silence so loud it made my ears ring. You know that feeling after a thunderstorm passes? When the air is still charged with electricity and the birds haven't started singing yet? That was my house. Caleb was gone. The truth, or the version of it I decided to sell, was out there. I woke up thinking I would feel sick. I thought I would be terrified. But honey, the mind is a wonderful mechanism for survival. Instead of fear, I felt lighter. I made myself coffee. I sat on the porch. I watched the mailman deliver the bills, and I thought, I did it. I walked through the fire, and I didn't get burned. I convinced myself that I was a hero. Can you believe the arrogance? I sat there sipping Folgers and told myself that lying to my son about his father was an act of mercy. He hates me for the affair, I told the cat. But he loves Hank, and that's what matters. I saved Hank's legacy. I decided to go into town. I needed to see people. I needed to see if the A for adulteress was branded on my forehead. I went to the Piggly Wiggly grocery store. I pushed my cart down the aisle, heart pounding. I saw Mrs. Gable, the choir director. "Morning, Harper," she chirped. "Are you bringing your famous deviled eggs to the potluck Sunday?" I smiled. "Of course, Beatrice." She didn't know. Nobody knew. Caleb hadn't screamed it from the rooftops. He was keeping the shame private. I felt a surge of power. I was the gatekeeper. I controlled the narrative. I bought a pot roast, even though I had nobody to cook for. I bought a bottle of wine. I drove home singing along to the radio. I was delusional, sugar. I was a woman dancing on a trapdoor. Tuesday. The silence from Caleb continued. No texts, no calls. I checked his Facebook. Nothing. I decided to go visit Hank. I drove out to the cemetery. It's a nice spot, under an old oak tree that drips Spanish moss. Silas lies in the big marble mausoleum on the hill, overlooking the whole graveyard like a pharaoh. But Hank lies in the soft earth, near the azaleas. I cleaned off his headstone. Henry Wilson, beloved husband and father. I traced the letters with my finger. I fixed it, Hank, I whispered to the grass. I told the boy. He knows I was weak. He knows I strayed, but he believes he's yours. I made sure of it. I sat there for an hour, talking to a dead man, trying to get his absolution. You were the better man, Hank. Silas had the money, but you had the soul. Caleb needs to be a Wilson. He can't handle being a Miller. The Miller blood is poisoned. I cried a little. Tears of relief. Tears of exhaustion. I drove home feeling cleansed. I thought the worst was over. I thought Caleb just needed a few weeks to cool off, and then he'd come back. He'd be cold, sure, but he'd be my son. Wednesday, the day the illusion cracked. It started with a feeling. You know how a mother knows? My skin felt prickly. I kept looking at the phone. It sat on the doily table like a grenade waiting for the pin to be pulled. By 5 p.m., I couldn't take it anymore. I texted him. I love you, son. Take all the time you need. I'm here. I watched the screen, delivered, read. Nothing, no typing bubbles. No, okay, just silence. That silence wasn't the silence of an angry son, honey. It was the silence of a prosecutor building a case. At 9 p.m., the phone rang. It echoed through the empty house like a fire alarm. I snatched it up. Caleb? Hello, Mother. His voice. Lord. His voice sent a chill straight down my spine. It wasn't the voice of the man who yelled at me on Sunday. It wasn't emotional. It wasn't heated. It was flat. Metallic. It was Silas's voice coming out of my son's mouth. Caleb, are you okay? I've been so worried. I'm fine, he said. I'm clear. Clear? I have clarity. I spent the last 3 days doing some work, some due diligence. My stomach turned over. What kind of work? I went back to the old dealership building, Mom. I still have the keys. I went through some of Uncle Silas's old boxes in storage. I stopped breathing. Why would you do that? Because I needed to know who I was dealing with. I needed to understand the man you loved. He paused. The static on the line hissed. I found some things, Mother. Interesting things. Things you forgot about. There's nothing there, Caleb. Just old tax returns. Is that right? He let out a dry chuckle. Well, we can discuss that tomorrow. Tomorrow? I'm coming over at 8 a.m. Don't make breakfast. I'm not coming to eat. I'm coming to close the deal. Caleb, you're scaring me. Close what deal? The deal you made 40 years ago. Click. He hung up. I stared at the phone. Closed the deal. That's business talk. That's Miller talk. I didn't sleep a wink that night. I paced the floor. I prayed. I drank wine. What could he have found? Silas didn't keep a diary. Silas was careful. Maybe he found a photo? A love letter? Whatever it was, it couldn't prove paternity. It could only prove the affair, which I had already confessed. So why was I so terrified? Because of his tone. He sounded like he held all the aces. Thursday morning, today. The sun came up red and angry. I showered. I put on my best face, foundation to hide the dark circles, lipstick to hide the trembling mouth. I put on my pearls, my armor. If he was coming to fight, I would look like a lady. I sat on the porch at 7:45 a.m., waiting. At 8 a.m. sharp, the black BMW turned onto the gravel driveway. It didn't kick up dust this time. It moved slow, predatory, like a hearse. Caleb got out. He was wearing a suit, a full navy blue suit, tie and all, in this heat. He looked like a CEO coming to fire an employee. He wasn't alone. He walked around the car and opened the passenger door. A man stepped out. A man with a briefcase. I didn't know his name, but I knew his type. Expensive shoes, shark eyes, a lawyer. My knees almost gave out. Why did he bring a lawyer to talk to his mother? Caleb walked up the steps. He didn't kiss me. He didn't smile. He stopped 3 feet away. "This is Mr. Thorne," Caleb said. "He's witnessing this conversation." "Caleb, what is going on? Why are you doing this?" "Let's go inside, Mother. It's too hot for lies out here." We went into the parlor. Caleb sat in Silas's old armchair. He looked so much like him it made me dizzy. He placed a large yellow manila envelope on the coffee table. It sat there between us, ugly, heavy. "You told me on Sunday that I was a Wilson," Caleb said softly. "You are," I pleaded. "You have Hank's heart." "Stop," he said. He held up a hand. "Stop with the poetry. I'm tired of poetry. I want facts." He tapped the yellow envelope. "You challenged me, Mom. You told me to trust you. But you taught me that Millers don't trust. They verify. What is in that envelope, Caleb?" He leaned forward, his blue eyes locked onto mine. "I remembered something, Mom. Something from when I was 10 years old, the day Silas gave me the dirt bike." I nodded, trembling. He gave me a helmet too, but it was too big, so he gave me his old driving cap, the tweed one he used to wear in the convertible. I remember that cap. "I kept it," Caleb said. "I kept it in my closet for 30 years. I loved that cap because it smelled like him." He smiled, but there was no joy in it. "And do you know what stays in an old wool cap, Mom? Even after 30 years? I shook my head, tears streaming down my face. I knew what was coming. I saw the train coming down the tracks, and I couldn't move. "Hair," Caleb whispered. "Follicles, roots, DNA." He opened the envelope. He pulled out a document with the logo of a private genetics lab in Atlanta. I drove to Atlanta on Monday morning. I paid for the rush service. Expedited. He held the paper up. "Do you want to read it? Or do you want to guess?" I couldn't speak. My throat was closed shut. "It's a match, Mother," he said. His voice was thunder. 99.999%. Silas Miller isn't my uncle. He is my biological father. The world tilted on its axis. The lie was dead. The 45-year-old dam had finally burst. I looked at my son, hoping to see sadness. Hoping to see the boy who lost his identity. But I didn't see a lost boy. I saw a found man. I saw relief. And then I saw greed. He tossed the paper onto the table. It slid across the wood and hit my glass of tea. "So," Caleb said, leaning back and crossing his legs, "now that we have established that I am the sole biological heir to the Miller fortune, we have some business to discuss." He looked at the lawyer. The lawyer opened his briefcase. "The estate is settled," I cried out. "It's been 20 years. Aunt Martha got everything." "Martha had a life estate," Caleb said coldly. "But Silas's will had a clause for biological issue. If an heir appeared, the trust reopens." He stood up and walked over to me. "But there's a problem, Mom. To unlock the full trust, to get the lands, the dealership money, the $20 million sitting in offshore accounts, I need more than a DNA test. I need the master key." He leaned down into my face. "I need the contents of Aunt Martha's safety deposit box." I froze. "I don't have it," I lied. "Don't lie to me again," he shouted. It was the first time he raised his voice. "Martha told the nurse she gave you the key. She told the nurse that the insurance policy was with you." He straightened up and adjusted his tie. "You have the key, Mother, and you know what's in that box. It's the proof that Silas planned this. It's the proof that validates my claim against the cousins in Alabama. He walked to the door, the lawyer following him like a shadow. You have 24 hours, Caleb said. Bring me the key, or I sue you for fraud. I sue the estate. I drag your name, Hank's name, and this whole family through the mud on CNN. He opened the door. The heat rushed in again. I'm a Miller, Mom, and Millers don't ask. They take. Welcome to the family. He walked out. And here I am, sitting on this porch, with a key burning a hole in my pocket, and a son who just turned into a monster right in front of my eyes. They say that when you stare into the abyss stares back. Well, honey, I'm not just staring at it. I'm holding the key to it in my hand. Caleb gave me 24 hours. 24 hours to decide if I want to be a pauper with a clean record or a millionaire's mother with a ruined name. After he left with that shark of a lawyer, I didn't cry. I think I ran out of tears back in 1982. Instead, I felt a cold kind of clarity. Caleb isn't playing a game. He's going to war. He has the DNA. He has the ambition. And now, thanks to my denial, he has the rage. He wants the Miller Trust. $20 million. But to get it, he needs to break the original will. He needs to prove that Silas intended for him to inherit. He needs to prove that this wasn't just an accident of lust, but a premeditated plan. And that proof? It's sitting right here. She opens the shoebox. Inside, tucked under old letters and dried rose petals, is a small velvet pouch. She pours the contents into her palm. A heavy iron key. Old-fashioned, the kind that opens a heavy door. This is the key to Aunt Martha's safety deposit box at First National Bank. Martha gave it to me 2 days before she died. She pressed it into my hand and whispered, "If the boy ever finds out, if he ever turns on you, you burn what's in this box. You hear me, Harper? You burn it. Don't let him read it." I asked her what was inside. She looked at me with those dying eyes and said, "The receipt." I didn't understand then. I thought she meant a receipt for jewelry or land. But now, after seeing Caleb's face, I think I know what she meant. Silas Miller didn't do anything without paperwork. He was a businessman. He didn't just breed a child, he documented it. I suspect that box contains the journal he kept, or maybe a letter written to Caleb before he was born. Proof that Caleb was a project, a product. If Caleb gets his hands on that, he wins the lawsuit. He proves he was the acknowledged heir in Silas's mind. He gets the $20 million. But he will also see, in black and white, that his father didn't love him. His father owned him. So here is my dilemma, sugar, and it's a sharp one. If I refuse to give him the key, he sues me. He drags me into court. He puts me on the stand and forces me to admit, under oath, to the 12 years of adultery. He destroys Hank's memory publicly. He humiliates me in front of the church. He burns my house down to find the truth. But if I give him the key, I hand him the fortune. I make him the richest man in Georgia. But I also hand him the poison that will kill whatever human soul he has left. If he reads what Silas wrote, if he sees the cold, hard calculation of his own birth, it will destroy him. He will become Silas completely. I looked at this key for 3 hours. Then I picked up the phone. I called the bank manager, Mr. Henderson, old friend of the family. "Jim," I said, "I have the key to Martha's box. I need to come in." "Of course, Harper," he said. "Whenever you're ready." I hung up. I walked to the mirror. I looked at myself. I saw the 19-year-old girl who wanted to be special. I saw the young mother who prayed for brown eyes. I saw the widow who buried 2 husbands. And I saw a woman who was tired of running. I grabbed my purse. I walked out to the car. The heat hit me like a hammer. I drove into town. I drove past the church where I got married, past the cemetery where Hank is sleeping, thankfully oblivious to this mess. I pulled up to the bank. The clock on the dashboard said 3:55 p.m. 5 minutes until closing. I sat in the car, clutching the key. My phone buzzed. A text message from Caleb. Just a picture. It was a photo of the for sale sign he plans to put on my lawn if I don't cooperate. No words, just the threat. He really is a Miller. I took a deep breath. I opened the car door. I walked into the cool marble lobby of the bank. Mr. Henderson smiled at me. "Harper, just in time. Come on back to the vault." We walked down the long hallway. The steel gate buzzed open, the smell of cold metal and money. Mr. Henderson pulled the long metal box out of slot 402. He set it on the table in the private viewing room. "I'll give you some privacy," he said. He closed the door, and there it was, the metal box, cold, heavy, the final coffin of the Miller family secrets. I sat down. I put the key in the lock. My hand hovered there. I knew that once I turned this key, there was no going back. Pandora's box was a fairy tale. This was real. I thought about burning it, like Martha said. I could shove the papers in my purse, take them home, and light a match. Caleb would lose the money. The secret would die. But then, he would destroy me. He would never forgive me. Or I could open it. I could see what Silas left, and I could give it to Caleb. Let him have his money. Let him have his legacy, and let him choke on it. I gripped the key. I turned it. Click. The sound echoed in the small room like a gunshot. I lifted the lid. I expected papers. I expected legal documents. And there were papers, yes, stacks of them. But on top of the stack, there was something else. Something I never expected to see again. Something that made me cover my mouth to stop a scream. It wasn't a document, it was a cassette tape. And handwritten on the label, in Silas's sharp, jagged handwriting, were 3 words, "For my son." I stared at that tape. A voice from the grave. Silas didn't just write it down. He recorded it. He wanted to speak to Caleb. I reached out and touched the plastic case. And underneath the tape, I saw the edge of a photograph. I pulled it out. It was a Polaroid, dated 1983. It was a picture of me holding baby Caleb in the hospital. But I wasn't looking at the baby. I was looking at Silas. And I was smiling. And on the back of the photo, Silas had written, "The deal is done. Paid in full." Paid in full. My knees gave out. I sat in that chair, staring at the evidence of my own sale. I realized then that I wasn't just a mistress. I was an employee. And Caleb was the product. My phone buzzed again. Caleb was calling. I looked at the phone. I looked at the tape. I looked at the photo. If I give this to him, he wins the money, but he learns that his mother sold him. If I hide it, I go to jail or lose my home. I picked up the phone. I swiped answer. "Hello, Mother," Caleb said. "Time is up. Do you have the key?" I looked at the open box. I looked at the tape that could explain everything or destroy everything. I took a breath. "Caleb," I said, "I'm at the bank." "Good," he said. "Is it there? Is the proof there?" I looked at the tape one last time, and I made my choice. "Yes, Caleb," I whispered. "It's here, but it's not what you think." "I don't care what it is," he snapped. "Bring it to me, now." "I'm coming," I said. I hung up. I put the tape in my purse. I put the photo in my pocket. I closed the empty metal box. I stood up. I'm walking out to my car now, Sugar. I'm driving to Caleb's house. I'm going to play this tape for him. I'm going to let Silas speak from the grave. And whatever happens after that? Well, that's between a mother, a son, and the devil himself. You want to know what's on that tape? You want to know if Silas confesses? You want to know if Caleb takes the money, or if he breaks down when he hears his father's voice? Or maybe you want to know what I'm going to ask for in exchange for this tape. Because if I learned one thing from Uncle Silas, it's that everything has a price, and I'm done giving things away for free. My car engine is starting. The drive to Caleb's is 20 minutes. If you want to be in the room when I press play, if you want to hear the dead man speak, you know what to do. This is Harper Wilson, and for the first time in 40 years, I'm holding the gun. I'm going into Caleb's garage right now. My hands are shaking, but I'm going in. Do you want to hear the recording? Do you want to see if my son destroys me, or if this recording destroys him? Like the video and comment, listen to the recording. If this video gets likes and comments, I'll come back to tell you what happened next.